back, I had, for gosh, probably at least 15 years suffered from migraines, but I'd say at least 5 years back, my homeopathy stuff that I was using was not working, so I started to look at some herbal products. I had gotten this book, the Lost Book of Herbal Remedies book, and did some research on here on Fever for You. So that's one of the items in there that it talks about. So it gives you some options on how you can. The leaves are edible, but they're very bitter. So bitter foods again are good for digestion. If you didn't know that. So good use. But it says you can use the leaves and flowers of 2 to 3 leaves per day with potential to reduce, regular preventative for migraines and headaches. So that's why I had planted this. I don't believe I ever utilized for that purpose. I have taken this when I've had a fever or a cold. I had a fever once because I touched toxic gluten intentionally because I hadn't done it in like 10 years. So I'm like, oh, I'll wipe this table off without putting gloves on, and touched crackers that kids eat all the time that were on a table. I washed the table after the crackers were on there and ended up in bed with a fever. So me touching toxic gluten gives me a fever for at least a 24-hour period, or sometimes a little bit shorter. But that one, because I hadn't touched that toxic gluten in such a long time intentionally, that was my result of that. So then I had utilized this plant as part of that. So I'm grateful that I haven't had to utilize this for my headaches. Have you guys had anything that works for you? For if you have any head tension, pains, or things like that. I know, I forget the homeopathy things that I was using, and they were working quite well for a while. I'd say a good 10 years, but then they kind of stopped working for me. I'm going to get over to a little bit shadier spot in my yard because it's warmer here. But hopefully everybody is doing well. Again, my internet is hardwired, so you see the cord that I'm trying to drag with me. It is more of a pain, but I feel better because of it. When I was on vacation, I had to come back and get used to this hooking up to the internet, which it didn't take super long to do. But I got used to that. And what made me think of migraines is I was speaking to someone today, and they didn't know that you could opt out. So it was not fun going to the airport with a migraine. I was blessed to be introduced to phototherapy patches about 3 years ago. So I had on a hat with phototherapy patches, and I was wearing that, and that did help relieve some of my issues. Really, my real relief came when I got up into the air, and that fully relieved it. But when I had to take off my hat because I was opting out and going through the airport security, I had to remove my hat, and everything got extremely worse for me, especially being around all that equipment that they have in there that people are the option to opt out. And there's 2 areas to opt out as you're flying. When they first, there'll be a counter now. That's what it was when I just went flying recently. There was a counter of a person sitting there asking for my ID and then to stand in front of a camera. And I just said I was opting out. So they knew I was opting out for getting my photo taken. They were like, hey, just give me your ID then. So I handed over my ID. And then I didn't have to get that photo taken of that. If you want to know reasons why you would maybe want to do that, just I guess do a little bit of research and see if that's something that you want to opt out of too. But that's relatively easy. I also have a whole lot of issues with electromagnetic frequencies, so I also opt out of going through the scanners. And I know when I was sitting there with my migraine, it got worse when I had to remove my hat, which was giving me some relief with my phototherapy patches. And just being there was just getting worse and worse being around all that equipment. So I definitely was not going to opt in to doing that again. I don't know if I haven't been through one of those scanners when my daughter was younger, and you can go through the less invasive scanner, you know, scanning thing. I did do that with her, but definitely I opt out of the other ones now because of just being around it causes me issues for my health. So when you do that, so you can opt out of the photo if you want to do that, and then when you get to the next part, it's where you're putting all your bags on the conveyor belt and that kind of stuff. And you can opt out of going through the scanning machine if you want to. But if you do that, there'll be a little bit more of a wait. So you'll let that person know as you're putting your stuff on the scanner that you're opting out, and then they'll make sure that your stuff kind of goes through and pull it off to the side, hopefully. But you do have to remove your shoes and make sure you definitely have everything out of your pocket, even if it's Kleenex or paper or anything like that, because when you do opt out, you do get a pat down then. So they'll point you to an area to stand or a chair to sit on until they can get someone available to give you a pat down instead of having to go through the scanning options. But it's relatively easy process to do. I haven't had a whole lot of issues. Only one time when I've opted out of I've probably done it. I really try not to fly that much. I don't like flying because you can't bring all your stuff you like, like the dish soap. You have to buy new dish soap, you have to buy new hand soap. Everything out there is toxic, so it's harder to travel with packing all of that stuff. That's why I don't like to fly that much. But when I do have to fly, which I've probably gone on 4 trips maybe where I've had to take flights in the last 4 years, so roughly one a year. It has been relatively easy. Never had only one time where someone asked me why I was opting out. Obviously, medical issues. I'm like, that's all I said. I left it at that. But if they want to pay my medical bills for me and sign off on that, they're more than welcome to do that on my holistic, like holistic with a W, not an H, health that I am trying to do here with holistic living is, you can pay for those options because I'm not going to opt into the medical system either for a variety of things. So, but yeah, you can opt out and it's relatively easy to do. I am thinking, I've heard of some people saying also that they're carrying medical water or medical food because really, I got into the airport and it was super hard for me to find a spring water. I don't put certain waters into my body. The Sante and Aquafina, which are 2 popular ones, I can't remember which one was at the airport and which one was at the air show. Maybe it was one or the other, or one of those, it was those options, but that's what I was finding a lot of. And different things like things that say life water and things like that, and I don't know if that's for certain the name. Always flip things over, read the ingredients, see where the water source is from, but I prefer to look for spring water type thing. So usually I haven't had problems finding spring water at airports, except for just recently when I flew, and it was a little bit challenging both on the flight there and in RDU, which is Raleigh, and in Minneapolis on the way back. I didn't find it at the first store that I went to and at either of those options. And for the Raleigh one, I actually had to go to several places, ended up finding it in a smaller shop. So grateful for that, being able to find it. But I just encourage you to start removing toxins from your life. Your body will thank you for it and it will start to function better. If you provide your body also the minerals and nutrients that it needs to repair and rebuild itself, it also will work a lot better. I had not been taking a mineral supplement on a regular basis, but now I definitely do and really don't go without that um, as part of my routine. I know when I first started wearing phototherapy, that's when I really started learning more about minerals and minerals in the body. And I knew, about some of them and heard about some of these things, but just the importance of how it makes your body function better. So it's just a great thing to have in. If you have any athletes in your house, you want to make sure they're doing a clean electrolyte. And I always taught my kids when they were young because fortunately, my middle child was an infant when we started making lifestyle changes. So two of my kids were brought up more raised how to read ingredient labels, and my oldest, she definitely does read them now, but when we first started making changes, it was hard for her, so I couldn't imagine having to make food changes in kids, as they're older. I know that was, hard for me when I had to quit bringing her to the grocery store because she wanted to have all these things. And just make changes as what works for your family. I know I had some of my children they were really good at eating vegetables and then went into a routine where they were not. So then I would find certain vegetables that maybe they would be able to eat. Like my daughter was a toddler, and I'm like, okay, you like the color purple? Let's have purple lettuce. So creative ways like that. There's also I used my Vitamix. If you can shred things pretty well in that. If you fill it with water and then put carrots, some kind of vegetable in there, and you can shred it. You don't turn it up full speed when you're doing that, so you turn it about to I would say somewhere in the 5 to 7 speed to shred things up there, and then you can dump it into a fine mesh strainer and strain things out, but then that will get the vegetables pretty thin, and then you can mix that in with the variety of things that you're making. Also, I have heard from mytotalnutrition.com. So again, at mytotalnutrition.com, they have a mineral complex there, and people cook with that. So I haven't gotten into a regular habit of cooking with that, but that would be another way to get minerals in for your kids. I've heard great stories from people doing that. Since I've raised most of my kids from when they were younger, they are pretty well at taking a mineral if I say, let them know what the benefits are going to be for them. So they make sure they take it. I have athletes in my house, and I know they do have to have practice when it's hot and summer out, and they're able to make it through those practices because in the morning they had their mineral drink and electrolyte stuff. Again, read the labels. We do a variety of different electrolyte powders. Again, you have to read your labels on those. Many of those don't have salt that is a better salt, so I like Redmond's Relight because I know it has the Redmond salt in it, and I like the Redmond salt. That's a good mineral salt, so that's one of the electrolyte powders I converted my family over to utilizing. Also, coconut water was something I had given my kids early on because I knew the importance of that. Now that's a higher potassium, so you'll need to see if that is something that works out for your body. But you can get the sodium with the Relight and the potassium with the coconut water. Personally, it took me years, and I mean years, so my kids were young. Now they're teenagers, and I had been giving them coconut water for years, ever since they were young. That's what I would give them if they needed something to drink while they were sick, or if they ever need an electrolyte while doing sports and athletics and those type of things. But I personally didn't like coconut water until probably about 3 years ago. Then I just got into the habit of drinking it. You know, you can water it down with water, half and half, if you want to at first, or add some flavoring to it that you know is a good source of flavor. And then I just got into the habit of utilizing coconut water. So now, if we ever get a headache in our family, if I do, or my husband, or my kids, we I take a pinch of Celtic salt or a pinch of some kind of salt. My husband actually takes as a pinch of electrolytes because that's what he's had on hand sometimes when he's at work, and that seems to work for us. Also, I make sure I have coconut water on hand, so I take a drink of coconut water, and a lot of times that will take care of that and not have an issue. But if we do have an issue, then we're able to turn to the phototherapy products, and you know, we just have this hat sitting around, we call it the brain cap, and able to utilize that to alleviate any issues. I've seen my husband come in and look like he's gonna have to be in bed for the rest of the evening, and I'm like, oh, just put on the brain cap, and he's ready to go 15 minutes later. So it's amazing that how well that works. But you do need to make sure you have the right nutrients that your body needs, and everybody, you know, bodies work different, so see what works best for you. You might have to test out a variety of different things to see what works well for you, but just turn things around and read the ingredients and have a great day. But I do want you to just remember, if you're hopping on here a little late, you can choose to opt out at the airport. So if you are flying and going to fly, you can opt out of the facial scan. So that's when they come and get your ID. They'll ask you to stand in front of a camera. All I said was, I'm opting out. So then they said, okay, just give me your ID. So I gave them my ID. And then you can also opt out of having to walk through the scanners if you want to opt out of the scanners. And then that's just when you put your stuff on the conveyor belt. You tell that worker that you're opting out, and then they'll have to contact someone to give you a pat down. So you'll have to get a pat down instead of going through a scanning machine. But you do have the option to opt out of things if you so choose. It does take a little bit longer, but it wasn't anything extensive. You'll want to make sure, if you have Kleenex in your pockets, paper in your pockets, that's all out. You do have to take off your shoes. And if you have anything, any medical devices, so continuous glucose monitor, or even I had a phototherapy patch on me. The first time I opted out, I needed to let them know, hey, yeah, I got this on my person. So just to make them aware of what they may see or anything like that as they're doing their pat down. But they will ask you to either sit down or stand over in an area, and then they'll come and get you in a spot where you don't have to go through the scanners to get scanned. And then they'll have you stand there. You can either get pat down right there where everybody is walking through there. I just feel like it's pretty busy at that time. People aren't really staring and watching everybody get pat down, so I had no problem getting pat down around everybody else. But they do ask you if you want to go somewhere else. Have no idea what that would be like, because I just do it right there, so I don't have to go somewhere else. I didn't feel like it was very intrusive. Like, I was so concerned about other people seeing it, and maybe, you know, someone might see it and be like, huh, I wonder what they're doing, or ask me like, whoa, why did you do that? Well, you have the option to opt out if you want. So I encourage you guys to be your own best health advocate. That's, you are that person. So we get to choose who our health and wellness team is, and what we utilize and put in and on our bodies. So you are your best advocate. So I encourage you guys all to be that. Have a blessed day.